Welcome to the Soma Moon Wellness Podcast. I'm Stephanie Woods, co-founder of Soma Moon Wellness, an online education and movement platform devoted to whole self learning, embodied awareness, and sustainable ways of caring for real bodies. Today's episode is one we wanted to bring into the Soma Moon space because it sits at the very foundation of our work. It's a conversation originally shared on Becoming Her, and it centers on something many of us move through our entire day without noticing at all: our breath. In this episode, you'll hear from my co-founder, Janetta Bodie. Janetta is a pelvic health yoga therapist, strength and conditioning coach, and a breathwork guide who has spent over a decade helping women reconnect with their bodies through movement, nervous system awareness, and somatic education. This conversation explores the relationship between breath and the pelvic floor, how stress and holding patterns show up in the body, and why healing isn't about forcing change, but about learning to listen. Janetta weaves anatomy, lived experience, and simple practices to help you notice where your breath is, where it's restricted, and how that directly affects your strength, continence, pleasure, and safety in the body. Whether you're new to this work or returning to it, we're glad you're here. Let's begin.
Recently, I was sitting in a room full of women at one of my pelvic floor workshops. I asked a question: how many of you have thought about how you breathe today? And not a single person raised their hand, which is absolutely to be expected. Many of us don't go through the day thinking about how am I breathing. But here's the reality: your breath is the key to unlocking your physical strength, relaxing your pelvic floor, recovering from incontinence, and even creating pleasure and getting the pain out of sex. When I work with clients, I will not do any pelvic floor work unless they're willing to commit to understanding breath work. When you hold your breath, your pelvic floor automatically tightens. If you take the tongue and push it to the roof of your mouth and clench your jaw, you can immediately feel tightness in your pelvic floor. Many of us are moving through the world not even realizing we're holding our breath. Today, I want to talk about the connection between breath and pelvic floor. My work is rooted in movement, breath, and the deep wisdom of the body. Through years of coaching and working with women on their pelvic floor, chronic pain, and nervous system health, I've learned that transformation isn't just about fixing the problem. It's really about reclaiming your story, and that's what we do here. This podcast is a space for real conversations where we break free from shame, unlearn old patterns, and step fully into the woman we're meant to be. Whether you're talking about your breath that you didn't know you were holding, the way trauma lives in your body, or how to cultivate confidence from the inside out. Let's take a deep breath together. Deep breath in. Maybe hold at the top for just a moment, and then open mouth, let it go. Good. Did you notice where that breath went in your body? Did you feel it in any particular part of your shoulders, your chest, your belly, your back? I'm going to start asking lots of questions about the breath. This is how I teach in our program, Empower Your Core. I really need you to begin to understand and feel sensation in your body. And it starts with understanding what's going on with your breath. Let's address why breath matters in relationship to your pelvic floor. Your respiratory diaphragm and your pelvic floor are best friends. And when one struggles, the other does too. Ideally, they work together with one another. That means when one is lengthening, the other is shortening. And one is shortening, the other is lengthening. There's this constant stability happening within your true core. An image of your true core is a canister, like a Coke can. It has a top, the respiratory diaphragm, it has the bottom, the pelvic floor, and then it has all the muscles that encapsulate your rib cage and help you move through life stable. When you hold your breath, hold a muscle for an extended period of time, that muscle becomes tight and often weak. Holding your fist for an extended period of time can make that fist exhausted and tired. This creates a dysfunctional breathing pattern, which puts us in a constant state of sympathetic breathing. That puts us into stress mode. It's harder to heal because we're probably not sleeping very well. It can lead to incontinence and very hard to have an orgasm. Here are a few signs that you might not be breathing well. clenching your jaw, maybe your shoulders are up to your ears, or you're always feeling on edge. For me, this is a big one. I have a spot under my right shoulder blade that when I get stressed, it starts to tight and I can immediately check in with my breath. It is a sure sign that I am stress breathing. Another is when you pee a little, when you laugh, sneeze, or exercise. A sense of feeling disconnected during sex or struggling with an orgasm. Constant tightness of your low hips, low back, or neck. These are just a few signs that you might want to consider breath work. There's a good chance with the amount of stress that's in this world that we live in today that you have picked up some dysfunctional breathing patterns. Particularly if you've had a child, I believe that postpartum work is for everyone, no matter if your baby is 2 months old, 2 years old, or 20 years old. This work is still for you, and there can be recovery of your pelvic floor and respiratory diaphragm. It is never too late to do this work. And I hope that feels exciting to you, that there is hope. Let's talk briefly about how breathing works in an ideal world. I like to think about the respiratory diaphragm as a dome, maybe like a jellyfish, how a jellyfish oscillates in the water. It kind of flattens out and then it pulls up back into the dome shape, and that helps it move through the water. I like to think about the pelvic floor as a hammock. I watch my son climb into a hammock. As soon as he gets in, his weight begins to press down, and the fabric of the hammock stretches and supports his weight. I want you to think about your jellyfish is on top of the hammock. So as you inhale, the jellyfish flattens out and the hammock takes the load. As you exhale, it's like my son got out of the hammock so that the jellyfish can lift back up again. When that happens in our body, the ribs should go out and there should be movement and expansion. If the movement of our rib cage is restricted, meaning the muscles of our ribs are really tight because they're not used to going to that range of motion anymore, then breathing can feel unnatural and it can feel really tight. It can feel really hard to get a breath. When we do breath work, the first thing I always start with is the somatic exploration of breathing. Can you feel where your breath is moving? One of my favorite positions to do this type of work in is laying on my back with my feet flat on the wall. My feet are in line with my knees and my knees are in line with my hips, making a perfect right angle. It takes the weight off of the pelvic floor. And I take my hand to my chest and put a hand on my belly. Allow yourself to be in a relaxed state and notice what happens with your breath. Can you feel full expansion? Can you feel any contraction? Sometimes we try to take these big breaths and all that happens is we lift up our chest and we suck in our belly. And then when we let it go to try to exhale, our chest drops down and our belly pooches out. That's called paradoxical breathing. The majority of women have that type of breathing postpartum because of how baby has been pressing up into the respiratory diaphragm and tends to flare the ribs out with pregnancy. If you are a chest breather, you're also probably a mouth breather. And before you go like down the rabbit hole of, oh my God, am I a mouth breather? There is a time and a place for mouth breathing. It is high intensity, fast sprinting work. Like when we need quick energy, quick movement, quick response, that's when we need to mouth breathe. When we're talking, we mouth breathe, right? I am mouth breathing right now. We don't want to mouth breathe all the time because we don't want to be in sympathetic all the time. If our go-to breathing pattern is opening our mouth, then that is a sign that we need to do some breath work. The other is breath holding. This is a big one that I see in exercise. When we go through like a squat, inhale at the top, we hold our breath, we go through the squat, and then we that's the noise I listen for when I'm coaching, and I can tell people are not breathing because it's like this, I gotta get it out of my body because you've been holding your breath. The respiratory diaphragm might come down more, but it's going to press your internal organs into a hammock, trying to hold our pelvic floor because we're scared. We have a history of incontinence. That hammock is extremely taut and it will not move. You can't keep adding weight to a taut hammock and expecting it to give. There has a weight limit on purpose. In addition to mouth breathing, chest breathing, or breath holding, the last thing I'd like for you to pay attention to, and this is a big one for me, is sucking in your stomach all day. That is something I did when I'm nervous. I will hold my lower abdominals, which means that there is no room for expansion of the belly. It causes weakness in the core and it stresses the pelvic floor muscles. If you are trying to determine if you suck your belly in, I want you to get into tabletop on all fours. Think about my hand on your belly, and you are trying to relax all the parts of your belly. I want you to think about, I've eaten the biggest meal. I'm just going to let it all go. Then you're going to pull those muscles off of your hand until it feels like there's a corset around your body. That is core work. It's not sexy core work. It's quite painful core work because it's painfully slow. But it really helps to know, am I sucking my belly in all day? If your abdominal muscles aren't moving, if they're just constantly holding, that affects the greater whole. I don't want you to get discouraged because this is the hard part. This is the part that I spend on the floor with my clients. We're literally sitting on the floor, hands on belly, trying to figure out how to breathe, where there is restriction. Can you feel this? It really is somatic work. I do want to talk about how your breath affects your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system is the part of your nervous system that happens automatically. This is why we don't really think about breath, because our body doesn't need us to take up energy thinking about our breath. Our autonomic nervous system has two parts of it. It's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And probably about 6 or 7 years ago, the nervous system became really popular to study. I went down every single rabbit hole I possibly could, and I just got latched on to either we're parasympathetic, which is this rest, digest, pleasure, or we're sympathetic, which is stress, fight, flight. But the reality is we go to either one of those ends, but most of us want to live in this homeostasis balanced middle, where we have access to the sympathetic to call us to attention, to fight for things that are important, to have courage, to have some stress in our lives. And we also want to know how to access the parasympathetic. We want to be able to sleep well. We want to be able to rest, to enjoy sex, to be present, to calm down. But we're not robots. We don't just have an off and on switch. So there's this space in between. But it starts with, where are we now? Because we cannot change what we're not aware of. The cool thing about your autonomic nervous system is, yes, it is automatic. We don't have to think about pushing our blood through our veins or our heart pumping. We don't have to think about our liver. Everything happens automatically if our body stays healthy. Our autonomic nervous system deeply affects our somatic nervous system, what we sense and what we feel, and our somatic nervous system can heavily influence our autonomic nervous system. Let me give you an example of this. I want you to think about going into a yoga studio where you don't know anybody, you don't know anything about the studio, but maybe you're in town for the weekend and you wanted to go to a yoga class. They check you in and then you go to the class and nobody says anything to you. The teacher doesn't ask you your name. You can see a couple other women circling around, having conversations, kind of whispering. What does that do to your system right now? Did you just put yourself in that story? For me, if I think about that scenario, because I have been in that situation many, many times, my shoulders begin to get tight. My breath immediately moves into my chest. I am clenching my glutes. My hands are a little clammy. That is a sympathetic response. What I just described to you is a somatic response. Yes, my autonomic nervous system went into sympathetic, but it relayed that information to me by producing somatic responses in my body. This is so incredibly helpful because what I have learned to do is to recognize how many of those responses are based on stories that I tell myself. I am safe in my own body. It feels good to go into a yoga class and be on the mat and be in my own space and breathe, know that I'm safe. Let me give you another example. Imagine walking into a yoga studio for the first time and you are greeted at the door. Somebody says your name as soon as you walk in. Hey, are you Mary? This is your first class, right? I'm so glad you're here. My name is Janetta. This is our space. Take a look around. This is where your stuff is going to go. These are the props that we can use. And hey, let me put you next to Jan. She comes regularly. She's going to tell you everything you need to know about class. And what do you know? Jan starts talking to her. What that sense of safety accomplishes is that as I've told you that story, there's a good chance that your parasympathetic nervous system kicked in. Where you're like, oh, I'm safe. I can rest here. I can let my guard down here. I don't have to be in a constant state of flight. There is a somatic response in the body when we do that. I'm telling you this super sciencey thing because this has been one of the most helpful things for me as I've recovered from old stories I told about myself and choosing to believe new ones. Getting really familiar with how you breathe, if you're breathing, where you're holding breath, and what is happening inside of your body because of your breath is one of the most important things that we can do in healing our relationship with ourselves and with our pelvic floor. I want to do a quick exercise so that you can feel your breath and your pelvic floor connection. I want you to go back to that exercise where I have you on the ground with your feet on the wall in that 90-degree angle, knowing what we know about the pelvic floor, breath, and our nervous system. With your hand on your belly and one on your chest, I want you to see if you can soften your body. You don't have to let everything go, but just allow yourself to soften and relax. Focus on the hand in your belly. And thinking about as you inhale, can you press your low back into the ground and see if you can lift your belly. Nice deep inhale. Then I want you to open mouth, sigh it out. Like you're fogging up a window. That means that we have to open our jaw and we have to keep our throat open. We'll get into the connection between the jaw and the pelvic floor later. When you think about inhaling into the low belly, and we're going to open mouth all the way to the end. You're going to feel like you're running out of breath, but I want you to get that last little bit, even more than you think you have out. We're engaging with the transverse abdominis. It's the deepest abdominal muscle that's a natural corset around our body. As you inhale, I want you to think about your sit bones that are pointing to the wall, spreading out, and the hammock going toward the wall. The weight of your pelvic floor is pressing toward the wall as you inhale. As you exhale, think about your respiratory diaphragm. The jellyfish is lifting up. The weight in the hammock of your pelvic floor is moved out of the way, and your sit bones come back together. It's this inhale, respiratory diaphragm comes down, ribs go out, pelvic floor gets heavy. As we exhale, the sit bones come together, the pelvic floor begins to lift. There's a contraction of our abdominal muscles, bringing a corset around our ribs, and that respiratory diaphragm lifts up. That is the movement of breath that I want you to work on. Empower Your Core is baby steps. The first 4 chapters are going to feel a lot like this podcast, where we'll take one aspect of breathing, pelvic floor, incontinence, or nervous system. Then we're going to break it into all of its parts and give you a breathing skill or something very simple to work on. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed because this topic is huge. This is what it's going to be about. Figuring out how to work with your body so that by the end of it, you are very in tune with what is happening inside of you, what parts of your body are moving, and what's down there, and learn techniques of how to relax when you're going to the gynecologist. This is the type of breathing helps that. It helps your pelvic floor muscles relax so that I can actually have my annual exam without having a panic attack. That would be nice, right? As you go throughout your week, I want you to ask the question, am I breathing? Periodically, when you're in the line in the grocery store, am I breathing? And you're going to be amazed at how much the answer is no. Or you're holding your breath. Where do I feel tension? Maybe even set reminders on your phone. Every hour, hour and a half, 90 minutes for a week, it goes off and you're like, what is my breath? Holding that stress for the entirety of the day makes you wonder, when you're trying to go to sleep, you're not a robot. You're not going to be able to just turn that tension off. Starting this breathing practice after you get up in the morning and before you go to bed at night. That'd be a great time to practice this laying on the floor with feet on the wall. This work is slow. Your breath is often the missing link. You can do this 5 minutes a day. You can do this in the car. That's the beautiful thing about breath work. You don't have to go to the gym to do this. It doesn't have to be a 60-minute yoga class. When you take 5 minutes a day to reconnect with your breath, Your pelvic floor, your stress, your workouts, and even your pleasure will change. I promise you. I promise you. Because I have helped hundreds of women. This has been fundamental in my career. Your breath is one of the easiest and most powerful tools to access, and you have it already. I want to finish today with a quote from Donna Farhi. She says, "If the movement of the breath is restricted or distorted in some way, all other patterns of movement and consciousness will also be restricted. Breathing better doesn't happen through forceful movement. Breathing is both a process that happens unconsciously and a process that can be controlled. We want to come to a place where we simply become conscious of being breathed." I hope that's what you can do this week, is become conscious of being breathed. Participate with your breath instead of forcing it to do what you need to do or using it as a shield to protect us from the world.
If this episode sparked curiosity or helped something click for you, and you're ready to explore this work more, we invite you to check out Empower Your Core 101. This is a self-paced course where Janetta takes the concepts you just heard today, breath, the pelvic floor function, nervous system regulation, and breaking them down into simple, practical steps that you can feel and apply in your own body. It's designed to help you build awareness first, so strength and stability can actually support your life. You'll find the link to the Empower Your Core 101 in our show notes. Again, thank you for being here, for listening, and for taking a moment to notice your breath. We're grateful to walk alongside you. Be well, be loved, be blessed. Namaste.